Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where we take a deep dive into a particular film and wrapping up our 3 week streak here, talking about some John Ford World War II documentaries. It's my buddy Jim. Jim, thank you so much for coming on,
Hello, Internet.
and the internet welcomes you back, Jim. And for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have 3 segments. We do have coming attractions for May 17th, which there's a few wide releases coming out this weekend, which we'll talk about. But then we'll get to our feature, which is At the Front in North Africa with the U.S. Army. And if you can't tell what that's about, I don't know how more specific this title can get for you. And then we'll wrap things up with some recommendations. But with the 17th, we do have most of May, or each of the weekends are kind of anchored by a big movie. This particular weekend, we have John Krasinski's If Imaginary Friend. For those enlightened of us who have watched the show, it definitely feels like a ripoff of Foster's from Cartoon Network. Um, and then they have The Strangers, that horror film that's now getting a prequel trilogy or something like that. Because why? Trailer looks pretty creepy though. It'll be interesting. But the other wide release is what Jim's most excited about. And Jim, why are you most excited about Back to Black?
I'm a music fan. I like Amy Winehouse. I dig her music. Um, and I recently watched the documentary. I think it's just called Amy
Amy,
on.
I did too.
It's grim, yeah.
It's
And I'm not usually one for biopics. Take your pick.
yep.
But I'd give this a shot for that reason, because yeah, we lost her too soon. She's a very interesting character, interesting person, and I really enjoyed the music she made. So, I mean, I have no plans to see it, but if I were going to go out to the theaters this weekend, that'd be the one I'd be going to see.
I am a big fan of Marissa Abela, who is playing Amy Winehouse. She's in the show Industry on HBO. And I'm interested to see what she does. I just haven't heard the best reactions to the film, and I know it's released elsewhere. I have a friend, Alice, who's in Australia that I think saw it already, and um, I this is a really tricky subject matter to deliver respectfully, and it'll be interesting to see. And also, I didn't realize Sam Taylor Johnson was directing this, who I don't really know how to feel about her work. Like her biggest film that she's directed was 50 Shades of Grey. I know she's obviously
Oh.
done other things and probably wants to be remembered for other things, and also not her potentially problematic marriage to Aaron Taylor Johnson, because she met him when he was a minor. Um, and she's considerably older than him. But
I
yeah,
think
so
I've heard about this. Yeah.
So interesting things. Probably shouldn't be the conversation when it's a movie about Amy Winehouse, but I will be seeing it. By the time this episode releases, already have seen it on early Dolby screening at AMC, which I'm pretty excited about that because especially because of the music, get that
Nice.
nice rich uh auditory experience watching the film.
Well,
The
do you
film
know
that
yet
I
if they're
oh,
gonna is she gonna sing?
That's a good
Marissa Bella.
question.
Is she gonna sing in
Based
the
off of
movie?
the trailers, it just sounds like Amy Winehouse,
Okay.
to be honest. And that's always the tricky thing too, because there's certain singers like how like that was my biggest thing about Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm like, how do you find somebody that can sing as well as Freddie Mercury?
You don't, but you find somebody who can sing pretty well, and then you meld the voices together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Overlay. Which like one of the things I loved about Rocket Man was because like that was actually Egerton singing and like actually performing and stuff like that. And that's more of like an actual musical because I love Rocket Man. That was the music biopic that I wished that blew up. between that and Bohemian Rhapsody, but alas, it wasn't. But you know, I still love it and have it on my Blu-ray because Rocket Man's great. But the movie I'm most excited for this weekend is Babes. I'll admit I'm a huge fan of the show Broad City that had Abby Jacobson and Alana Glazer in it. I'm a big fan of Alana Glazer, and I know she co-wrote this film and she's starring in it. And the basic idea is it tells the story of Eden, who becomes pregnant from a one-night stand and leans on her married best friend and mother of two to guide her through this whole experience. So it's like that kind of like buddy experience with her and Michelle Buteau. And based off the trailer, I think it looks like it's a fun time. And I trust Alana Glazer to come in, bring the laughs, and be a charismatic person. So looking forward to it. It's we've got a decent year with like small, like female centric comedy type films like this. Scrambled was one that came out earlier this year that I really loved. I would recommend that. So looking forward to this one.
Did you? I haven't seen Broad City, but is it like a? Is it going to be like a Judd Apatow type dramedy, or is it just going to be more down the goofy path?
This one seems like it's going to be mostly comedy. It is almost pushing 2 hours as I'm looking at the runtime on IMDb. So that's interesting. It's an hour and 49 minutes. See, if it was over 2 hours, then maybe it would be like a Judd Apatow movie.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point.
Um, but this seems like it's going to be more comedy. Um, I would definitely side recommend the show Broad City with Lucia Eniolo, who created it, and she has a newer show called Hacks on Max that just came out with its third season. So they've made some really awesome modern comedy together. So I'm a big fan of Alana Glazer, so I'll definitely be seeing it
Cool.
and looking forward to it. But those are our coming attractions for May 17th. But we do have at the front in North Africa with the U.S. Army as our feature here. This did come out in 1943. Basic background is it literally just documenting the North African campaign of the U.S. military. So, Jim, what are your general thoughts on the film?
Terrible special effects, terrible acting. No, I liked this one more than the last two we talked about, which were called
Because we
Battle
had Torpedo Squadron.
and Torpedo Squadron 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, this one was quite a bit longer. I didn't realize, pulling it up on YouTube, that it'd be, I mean, it's not long, 42 minutes,
Yeah.
41 minutes, something like that. Um, it's still propaganda, but it's closer to a documentarian style.
Yep.
The most interesting parts of the movie for me were the tanks, because I guess because the footage of the airplanes is from a first person view.
Mhm.
Anybody who's ever seen an airplane go overhead can imagine what a fighter plane or a bomber would look like. But I don't think I've ever been that close to an operational tank before. So like I thought that was cool how they showed, and I appreciated the voiceover, by the way, this time. Um, in the Battle of Midway, I thought the voiceover was super corny, but this was much more matter of fact and educational.
Mm.
Still propaganda, like I said, but I thought it was cool seeing them bring the Grants, the M3
Yep.
the medium tanks, across the water and dropping them off, and then the what was the other part that I really liked? I'll have to come back to. There was something I thought was really interesting, but I think they did a decent job of stitching together the footage in a documentary style, the same way like Discovery Channel will take footage that's been taken over hours and try to tell some kind of a story with it. That being said, I don't know how honest the narrative is, because it's propaganda. and one-sided, um, and there's a certain message that is trying to be told through the film. Yeah. Um, I don't know. What about you? What did you think of the film, Shane?
I definitely agree that this felt much more like a cohesive, like rich documentary kind of film. And it's like obviously Torpedo Squadron was just like a memorial film, basically,
Yeah.
in memoriam kind of film. And the first film that we talked about, The Battle of Midway, was much more of like really trying to like lean in on this is what we want you to feel and stuff like that. I do feel like a lot of this felt like we're just in it and kind of showing what it is. And obviously, it's going to have a prejudice to it. It's going to have a bias because, like, this is the U.S. Department of Military making this film and
Mhm.
wanting to show, like, hey, we're kicking ass over there, over there, over there. Which they did use that song multiple times throughout the documentary. I do think like the tank stuff was really cool, and this one I was pretty interested in because like one film that I always used to watch with my grandfather when I was younger was Patton,
Mm.
and just seeing the actual fighting from like that perspective of like a big chunk of the film Patton is where did Patton start? North Africa. And like he was sent in there fighting, supposed to be fighting Rommel,
Mhm.
because like Rommel was like S tier tank general of the Nazi forces and stuff like that. And getting to see them like bringing the tanks in and delivering the tanks. And there's a particular sequence in the film where they introduce like the battlefield, and there's a shot of like all these tanks coming straight at the camera, which was really cool. Um, they were able to really capture like the big scale of this battle because like a tank battle is not going to be something that's fought on like a small field real up close. It's like you're not going to have tanks like sitting next to each other shooting at each other. It's like this is
Yeah.
a big widespread kind of across the desert kind of feel. And I think this captured like the desert warfare in an interesting way because that's one of the most fascinating things about World War II is like it was fought in so many different places and on so many different terrains. And I know once they jumped to Sicily and having to deal with all the mountains and the rocks and stuff like that, and then obviously with D-Day and the landing in Normandy and like the whole fighting on the beaches and stuff like that. Just from like a historical context, this is a really interesting perspective of like, yeah, these are a bunch of like big metal things being moved across a giant like chessboard and basically like shooting at each other. And there's definitely moments where it's like they were capturing some really what seemed like authentic moments of, there's the like Nazi attacks, like dog fights over top of the cities and people having to go hiding and stuff like that. And it kind of felt like these were like hidden cameras capturing all these civilians um freaking out and trying to run for cover and stuff like that. So there was definitely some more dynamic and interesting things that I felt like we got out of this film than the previous two.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Hearing you talk about the scale, that was the other there
Hmm.
was that was the other scene that I enjoyed a lot. Someone had gotten kind of away from the battle, and they showed both lines of tanks coming towards each other. There was
Yep.
smoke coming from the one side and the other side. That was very cool and hard to do, you know. I don't know for this one. I don't know how many camera people there were. I don't know how much of this John Ford took himself. I almost said John Huston. I don't know how much of this footage John Ford took himself. I don't know if it was edited by the same person. I'm looking for his name, and Parrish. I don't know if it was edited by Parrish like the other two were. So I really don't know again how much Ford had to do with this film, or if he was just kind of in charge of the crew that happened to take the footage. You know,
Yeah.
was that? Did you notice somebody on a donkey that may or may not have been John Ford. Was that him?
And I made it. You know what? I have a bunch of notes and stuff like that. And what did I put for that? There's like this segment in there's like there's just like this section of levity where it's like, hey, look, riding a donkey, chopping chickens, banjo playing, like all these like little random things trying to like chop up the like military tension and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and they're humanizing they're humanizing their boys. I made like a small list of uh, like obvious propaganda points, like the downed planes, for example.
Hmm.
They only showed Nazi planes. They didn't even mention Allied planes shot down during the dogfight.
That's
And then they were
because
like,
none of ours got shot down, Jim.
right, yeah. I guess we'll make a memorial about them later on. And then they talked about how the Nazis attacked a church and they derailed a Red Cross humanitarian train. And they were kind of the Italians that I felt like the Italians were enjoying themselves on camera. But and then the corpses at the end of the film. I didn't think they were going to show any faces.
Mhm.
So I was kind of surprised when they did. But again, they were like the dead bodies; those are the humans, and these boys walking through the twilight like it's a Michael Bay movie. Those are your boys, your Yankees, you know. So I was like, that was a little bit rough, but closer to what I would want out of like a documentarian approach
Mhm.
than what what we watched last week.
Yeah, and documentary filmmaking is a very different approach than like filming a narrative film. And it's obviously not really the purpose or the ability to make something completely objective when, this is the military making these films and stuff like that. And obviously, they're not in the business of trying to make a partial perspective on all of this. It's like they're trying to like, hey, rah rah rah, what we're doing. And this film obviously did that. I think both of us mentioned, I feel like this had a lot more dynamic elements of what they were showing in terms of like the warfare and more to it than the other two. So I think that's an interesting thing. And it kind of makes me wish that like there were more objective filmmakers out there shooting the war and like really capturing like this is what this is was like really like without any kind of sense of bias or anything like that. But there's no way in hell that I would get close at this point in history.
No,
Because
that's like the
obviously
historian's
today,
dilemma, right? Like there's always a bias. You have to choose your facts. You have to choose which
yep.
scenes to leave in and which scenes to leave out. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you gonna say?
Um like at that point you wouldn't be able to do that. Like today, there's journalists in every kind of horrible place on earth with all kinds of stuff going on. And obviously, it's very dangerous. And the whole film Civil War that came out was about that type of journalism and stuff like that. So it's obviously something that, like, at this point, these were all directors commissioned by the military to come in and do this job and capture all these things. And, making sure that you come in with a nice, rousing over there at the end. Because,
Yes.
like, it definitely has that patriotic sandwich. The very beginning of the documentary, the very end of the documentary, really grabbing you and making you want to wave your flag.
Right. The Conquered Valley is now a free valley. I
Hmm.
enjoyed that. It made me think a lot though about how cell phones have changed uh, like firsthand accounts of
Well, yeah,
conflict
because we're all
settings.
filmmakers now.
But so like me, I've been avoiding. I'm not the guy who goes out there and I mean out there onto the internet and tries to find the footage of the guy getting his head chopped off. Like I actively avoid
Yeah.
footage from the Ukraine and from I don't know Mali, from God. Like there's a dozen dozens probably of armed conflicts going on in the world right now, and I don't want to see that kind of violence, so I like shut it out, which is, I don't know, that struck me as interesting. Like, it's almost like I'm ready to trust an agency to put together a film and show me, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I can digest this film. Thank you, John Ford. Now I know what's going on in the world, and I can go on with my day. Because it's just too much. I don't think I have the stomach to be aware of what's actually going on,
Well,
elsewhere in the world over there.
it's interesting because what was it, 20 Days in Mariupol, that won Best Documentary at the Oscars, and I remember watching that. Not easy watch in terms of like seeing what's going on in the Ukraine right now,
Mm.
and I could just go on Instagram and see stories of people that I know to see the most grotesque stuff going on over in Gaza,
Yeah,
because
right.
I certainly see plenty of it on Instagram, and it's just like I don't need that to tell me that bad stuff's going on there. Like, do I need to see every single little detail to understand something needs to be done? And that's the challenging thing, because when you do have people that have a phone, there's no editing. There's no like sheen to it. This is it. You're getting the most raw, unadulterated version of what's happening there. And that's hard to process. And like what you said, is like John Ford coming in there and polishing this all up nice and making it easier to process. And that's exactly what these films are doing. Because the whole entire point of them were to take this, send them back home, keep the
Right.
morale up.
Keep the morale up, right? And it does a good job of that. It keeps the tone pretty light considering the life and death nature of the conflict.
That's why
Um,
Vietnam changed everything.
yeah, Vietnam changed things in many ways. And then Iraq changed things again, maybe. I don't know. For me, like Vietnam happened before our time. So
Yep,
like it almost feels like something you read out of a book, just doesn't feel quite the same as something that happens during your lifetime. But
it's very true.
maybe instead of like a John Ford, I would watch a Vice news report or something like that, like
Hmm.
where they would take that cell phone footage and kind of edit it in. But um, you're right. That wasn't the aim of this movie, to show us what was actually going on. You're talking about 20 Days in Mariupol, which I didn't see, but it
Hmm.
reminded me of the Porcelain War. Did you see that one?
I
It
don't
was
think so.
favorite at Sundance this past year, um, but it was also about the conflict in the Ukraine. Again, I actually wanted to see it and I missed it. So
Yep.
not that I willingly was ignorant of that one, but Google's got a whole list of Ukraine movies that are out there if people want to educate themselves on what's going on there. But yeah, as far as back to John Ford and his role here, um, yeah, I think he did what he was supposed to do. I think it does tell a story, and it is educational. Um, Again, thanks to the voiceover, um, reminding me what the tanks were called. That I'd learned many years ago about the Lees and the Grants, and I'd
Hmm.
completely forgotten about it. So that's refreshed in my head at least. Um, and some fun footage of, yeah, the boys cooking chicken and stitching, needlework to fill the long hours
Yep.
of tedium, I guess, and again walking heroically through the sunset to bring freedom to the inhabitants of that poor valley over there in Tunisia or Algeria. Was the valley in Algeria or in Tunisia? Do you know?
That is a good question.
We're
I really
Americans. We're not
don't.
supposed to. Geography is not our thing, right?
That's funny because I used to know so much about World War II. I read so many books on World War II, and I generally have been really good with geography in terms of where places were. I used to spend so much time doing those like online quizzes of like where all the countries and stuff like that.
Like a sporkle?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Nice.
Because I always found it interesting, and I am one of those people that finds history interesting and like wars and stuff like that. Whether it was like all the time that I learned about ancient Rome and all the Punic Wars and stuff like that. And it's so funny because now all I can think of is oh, what's his name? The comedian that
Jim Jeffries,
no,
Louis C.K.
who does he was fired by SNL after 5 days because they couldn't do 2 seconds of looking up his old stuff. And then he was recently back on hosting and stuff like that. He does a whole entire thing. It's like, I love history. Um, that's like the first step towards being like uber conservative when you're older. I know. And it's one of those kinds of things where it's like if you're super obsessed with old war history and stuff like that, sign number one. It's the
Red
kind of
flag,
thing
red
like this.
flag.
And it's just like I used to spend a lot of time reading books and stuff like that, read books on Patton, and I just always loved history. It just when I went to college, I went more in like the practical kind of way in terms of other things that I was really good at, like business and statistics and stuff like that instead of history. But no, I loved history. And this is something cool. I obviously it's a very specific, narrow look at history, but it's still something cool to take a look at.
It is, and it involves us, as Americans. It's not like we're watching some obscure, I don't know, Lithuanian like propaganda film from the war.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's like this is relevant to us. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? As they say. I'm
Well,
embarrassed to say that most dads probably know more about World War II than I do. It's not my area. Uh, but when I was a kid, at least, it had an allure because it was easy to think of that conflict as being the last one where we were the good guys. There are some scenes in this movie where um, they mention the Arabs, um, the locals. They're like, oh, they were so helpful. They wanted to help us. They were happy we were there. There was a lot of that going
well,
on.
that didn't last.
There was a lot of that going on in the Iraq and Afghani wars, of recent times too. I remember on TV, like there'd be any heartwarming moment interaction between local kids and like a U.S. sergeant would be
All
like
over the news.
you'd see that on repeat, right? Um, but again, on a very simplistic, basic level, like people, it's easier to watch, and it's easier to think that things are going well, especially if you don't have any influence over what's happening there. It sucks to like know something's going really horribly wrong and you can't really do anything to stop it.
Well, and based off of our entrance into World War II, I don't think we had too much particular issues in the North African campaign. I know things got a little bit more complicated once we got into like Sicily and stuff like that. And then there's some like the Battle of the Bulge, which my grandfather fought in, was not an easy was not an easy battle. And that lasted. It was the winter. It was just a shit show. And I think this was like a time period where it's like, yeah, John Ford could throw out a film that's just like, yeah, we're kicking ass and taking names because we kind of were.
We kind of
When
were.
we
Yeah.
when we first came in, we were fresh, we were tired, we hadn't been fighting since 1939, like everybody else,
Yeah.
and it's basically like not to make a pro wrestling analogy, but it's like somebody had a mystery tag team partner come in halfway through the match and tag in and go on a hot tag and just start taking out everybody
Way to
because that
keep it
was
light.
that was basically us.
Yeah, it was. And we were making the tanks too. Like I believe most of those tanks were being supplied to the what was the Allies. It wasn't just the American troops that had access
Yeah.
to the tanks, you know. So yeah, we definitely it was a shot in the arm for the Allied effort for sure. And I don't want to to take a critical eye and look at this movie. I don't want to like downplay the heroics of any of the soldiers that were in North Africa. Um, and to the best of my knowledge, they did their jobs pretty well. Um, and I'm not aware of any like horror stories between the locals in Tunisia and the U.S. troops. But
Well, and I
it's
think it's
just
also important to
since
keep in
Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, I am suspicious of propaganda now. I think that's the thing.
well, and that's a tricky thing too, because we're looking at this from a context of like 2024 eyes. And like I would guarantee you more people in the United States would be more gung ho about seeing like our accomplishments as a military than people would today. It's just a different kind of experience and less of a focus on like that big patriotism about like, yeah, rooting for the US military and whatever we're doing. It's just like that's just not how life is anymore.
The
So like
zeitgeist has changed for sure. Yeah. But I was thinking just now of how I like when the Phillies win, I watch the highlights. When they lose, I probably don't watch the highlights. So like,
why do I want to relive it? Watch them lose again. It's like yesterday as we were recording them losing their win streak that they
oh, it's
had
okay.
going on.
They'll be all right. You can't win them all. Can't win them all.
Still best team in baseball. But yeah, I like that analogy because it's like, yeah, we're kicking ass. We're gonna throw some films out there for you to watch about it. But getting into our last segment here, we have some recommendations. And Jim, what show do you want to recommend to everybody?
Not particularly relevant to the content, but
True.
Fallout. I guess you could if you wanted to get into the Cold War and et cetera, et cetera. But I've been watching Fallout and it's really enjoyable. I've been getting into it. It's rare that I come across books and shows anymore that I really can just enjoy fully. And Fallout's one of those. So I'm trying to take it slow. I'm trying not to binge it. I think I've got 3 episodes left to go. It's a nice contrast as far as like video game adaptations to screen. It's not The Last of Us. It's funny. It's lighthearted. It's got old timey music. It's still violent, but I've been having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, Fallout.
Yeah, it sounds like I don't know if it's quite as far, but I know that when Twisted Metal came out last year, that was much more of like a fun kind of
You know what? I
crazy.
played that game and I haven't watched the show. I'm gonna add that to my watch list.
I enjoyed it. The first season came out on Peacock, and then the second season is really hinting at what the game's really like, which is
Okay.
a death tournament, basically. So, because he used to watch my stepbrothers play Twisted Metal all the time. But Fallout's definitely on my list to watch. I definitely want to get around to that one. I have a couple of recommendations. So, a new film, which is New Life, which is a new horror thriller that's out on VOD. It's like a tight 85 minutes. Um, Really, without spoiling anything, because it goes places. You have this mysterious woman on the run, and you have this woman in the government chasing after her, and we don't know why this woman's on the run and why the government cares so much. And when you find out why they do, it is quite frightening and it goes to some crazy places. So if you're looking for like an interesting horror thriller that's only like under 90 minutes, New Life is definitely worth checking out. One movie off my
And
watch list, which I'll be talking about on the Wasteland retrospective soon with my wife, is the Poseidon Adventure because she picked Twister and I wanted to pick a classic disaster movie to go along with it. And I had never seen the Poseidon Adventure before. And this made me think about this. This is how you make a disaster movie, where it's just like, wow, I actually care about these human beings and don't want to watch them die. which you can't say about every disaster movie. And like this is starring like Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Shelley Winters is in it. Um, Uncle Joe and Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka. That actor's in it. Roddy McDowell, he's in it as well. It's has a really great ensemble of a group of people, and Gene Hackman plays a preacher who has this relationship with God that's like driving him through there, but it's much more of like a new age kind of God's in my corner, kind of we're gonna get this done. And Ernest Borgnine's a very pragmatic cop, and they butt heads a lot in it. It has amazing special effects for 1972, and also Leslie Nielsen is the captain of the ship.
Nice.
So, and my wife's like, "Is this supposed to be funny?" I'm like, "No, Jess. Leslie Nielsen wasn't funny before Airplane." So he's not in it a ton because, like, to be frank, he's only really in the first act of the movie until ship flips upside down because this is about an ocean liner that gets flipped upside down.
I was going to say,
And
I had some kind of impression that the Poseidon Adventure
Poseidon Adventure. So the
was
72
about,
one's called The Poseidon Adventure. They
okay.
remade it in the early 2000s and it was just called Poseidon.
Oh,
And Richard Dreyfuss and Kurt Russell were in that one,
interesting.
which I can guarantee you Kurt Russell is the Gene Hackman type character because I could just see Kurt Russell being big and swaggering and hard headed. But no, this was a pretty great film, and it got nominated for like 8 Academy Awards.
Hmm.
Um, it came out the year The Godfather did. So, and Cabaret, which apparently won more Oscars than The Godfather. Um,
Really? I've never seen Cabaret.
Cabaret's pretty legit musical. Bob Fosse won Best Director over Francis Ford Coppola,
Huh.
which I feel like a lot of people are probably would be shocked to find that out. But
Speaking
that
of
didn't.
Nazis, there you go. That's like
Yep.
the go-to setting for, I don't know. I was thinking of Casablanca a
Yep.
little bit.
Classic films, gotta have them Nazis.
Gotta have Nazis.
And then the one movie of mine that I've rewatched that I wanted to recommend, which I'll also be talking about this on the Wasteland retrospective with my buddy Mike, because we're celebrating the brash, very adult summer of 1999, as we're going to be talking about American Pie and South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. Because
Oh,
what a special summer that was. Um, I love the South Park movie. I think it's absolutely hilarious. Speaking of musicals, it's such an effective musical, which is the wildest thing. And then you realize they made Book of Mormon too. So like they know how to make a
17.
musical.
I'm living in Utah and I haven't seen the Book of Mormon yet. I have to. I really do.
You need to watch Cannibal the musical first.
Okay.
That is the student film from college of Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And it's about a bunch of frontier people that get caught in the wilderness and accused one guy of cannibalism. Like it's based off an actual story.
Is it based on the Donner incident?
I don't know if it's specifically that one, but definitely that kind of idea, except it's a old frontier musical.
Okay. Intriguing. Intriguing.
Yeah, they have a new musical that they have coming out with a big time hip hop star coming out that they're going to be doing, and I forget who it is.
I think it's Kendrick Lamar, is it not?
I think it is.
But if
I
this if this nonsense keeps up with Kendrick, maybe they're gonna, I don't know. They might not want to work with him. I don't even know, like you said it's called
well,
Cannibal
let's
the
just say
Musical?
I don't think Trey Parker and Matt Stone are ones to shy away from controversy.
It's a
So,
very good point.
you know, trying to show Muhammad and all kinds of, you know, and the amount of stuff that they've done with Christianity, which, quick side note, when people get offended about what South Park says about them, as a Roman Catholic, I'm like, if I can watch South Park and laugh at all this stuff, you can too.
I feel like
Like
if there's a
they
demographic that it's okay to make fun of, it's Italian Americans. So like you have to have a good sense of humor, right?
well, that's very interesting, Jim, that you bring up this specific point because my wife always likes to point out, well, when all else fails and you don't have any minorities to make fun of, you could still make fun of Italians.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of true actually.
It's the accepted demographic of the least white people that you can still get away with making fun of all the time. So yeah,
It's
watching South Park and within the first season, seeing the whole episode with Satan coming to Earth and having a boxing match with Jesus, and Satan is the only wound up being the only one who betted on Jesus to win because all the citizens of South Park bet on Satan, and then Satan threw the fight. And then when you found out that God is some kind of strange badger kind of hybrid creature thing or whatever the hell he was. And then that one episode where you have all the priests with all the little boys on leashes and stuff like that.
oh
And
my
then the one
God.
priest finds the catacombs at the bottom of the Vatican, and it's basically Pitfall, the game, and finds out that the Roman Catholic Church is actually run by a giant interdimensional tarantula.
Oh my God. Wait, this was not all in the same episode.
Well, that from the kids on leashes up to that was all one episode.
God.
So like I remember Isaac Hayes quit because they made fun of Scientology. I'm like, um, get over yourselves. Like, and which
I think
also the
it's generally
episodes.
accepted that it's okay to make fun of Mormons and Scientologists. Those two are
I just
fairly.
remember that whole episode they did of South Park where they did the actual history of Scientology, and they kept putting like little text on the bottom. This is actually from the text of the Church of Scientology. So they were like, we're not making this shit up. This is
Right.
actually from what you believe in. And then they had that whole entire episode about the history of the Mormon church and everything. And then obviously that sprouted Book of Mormon. It's crazy. And it all started with South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. And that
Bonkers.
was the thing. How long did it take The Simpsons to release a movie? Like 17 years or something crazy like that. It took
Oh, it
South
was
Park 2 years.
long enough. I was old enough to see that movie in the theaters. I remember that. Yeah.
So basically, South Park is like, Iron's hot. We're taking it to the movie. And that, like, South Park came out in 1997. They had a movie by 1999.
Peaky Blinders could take a page out of their book, I think.
But even like Bob's Burgers, I think it was after season 14, they finally brought a movie
Oh, I
to the
haven't
big
seen the
screen.
Bob's Burgers movie.
I really enjoyed the Bob's Burgers movie. But like this South Park movie is like this is how you make a South Park movie. It's ridiculous. And the whole Satan, which also this is 1999 and Satan was having an affair with Saddam Hussein.
Oh my God.
So like this is pre 9/11.
Yes.
And like it's like heck yeah. And it's just like Satan's like, why do you want to talk so much? Let's just have some fun. And then Satan's just like, but Saddam, we used to sit up all night and talk to each other. Don't you love me anymore? Just like, and the musical numbers are so great. Like, Kyle's mom is a big fat bitch. Um,
I remember
classic.
kids on my hockey team quoting that song. I don't think I've ever seen South Park movie. American Pie is one of those movies that like I've seen bits and pieces of here and there on
Oh, I
TV
watched that way too young.
parties. Too young, huh?
My brother and my cousin made me watch that when I was like 11 or 12. And not gonna lie, I tried to watch the first two American Pies a decent amount, or the first three American Pies a decent amount, and not for the plot.
Of course not.
Let's just put that. I'm making that very clear. I did not try to watch that because, like, of course, the first movie has the whole Shannon Elizabeth thing on the webcam, which
Oh.
that aged poorly. Um, which that wasn't great when it came out to begin with, and then the whole thing in the second one with the two women who live in the house they're painting and they think they're lesbians. And then the third one, they have a whole bachelor party with a whole bunch of like these two strippers and stuff like that. And it's just like, yep, there's a lot of nudity in these. Certainly grabbed the attention of like 13-year-old Shane.
Indeed.
So
I think that's what it was designed and made to do.
I actually saw one of them in theaters, and it was American Reunion when
Oh,
that came out in 2012 because it was they wound up having a 13-year reunion, and which I actually enjoyed that quite a bit. That one was a little bit more tame, I guess, because like they're all supposed to be like, hey, we're adults now.
right.
Um, and funny thing was Eugene Levy actually got to have more fun in that. They made him like a dating profile and everything because Jim's mom passed away. And you
Oh,
actually find out that Jim's dad's actual name is Noah Levinstein. Because in the first three movies, it's just Jim's dad.
right.
So,
Mr.
Eugene Levy,
Doomsday.
national treasure. Canadian national treasure.
Oh, Canadian American pie.
There you go. But, Jim, thank you as always for coming on and chatting movies with me.
Always a pleasure, Shane. Always a pleasure.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.